Hello and welcome to another episode of What Our Parents Said from the Woodsman Project. I am Jack Woods. With me as always is my good partner in crime. I wouldn't say good, I would say great partner in crime, Landen Wood. How are you doing today, Landen?
Doing pretty well. How about yourself?
I am Jay chillin'. The room is finally cold. The cat is finally acclimating well to the room. It feels great.
We love Henny.
And we love Henny.
The cat.
We love Henny the cat, my cat. She's underneath the table right now. We're sitting in the chairs in the middle of the room. It is cold in here. Landon got a sweatshirt. It's so cold in here. So that is a high compliment to the good folks at Honeywell who make air conditioners. They do not sponsor us. We are trying to get them to. All right, Landon. Air is something that we can apparently control in this house, which is the worst segue into what we're talking about today. Control. The concept of control. So
if you're going to let anybody control your air, let Honeywell control your air.
Let Honeywell control your air is what we're trying to say. Honeywell, if you're listening to this, please sponsor us. We are two broke college kids and we need food, man.
But we have air.
We have air, so that's it. Yeah, we spent this month's food supply on an air conditioner. It's so cold in here. So cold in here now. It's great. But Landon, control, man. Control. What did your parents tell you about control?
I referenced this in the last episode, but I feel like it's a great way to start off, is stay in your own hula hoop, you know?
Stay in your own hula hoop. That's an interesting one.
It was one of my mom's favorite phrases for when I was, let's say younger than teen years, used during that entire time. And stay in your own hula hoop means that you only have control of yourself. You have control of your actions, your thoughts, your emotions, and what you're going to do with yourself. And to start off the control, that is all we have control of, is ourselves.
Okay. And anything, like, you want to elaborate on that? You want to tell us a little bit more about what that means?
Keeping in perspective what we have control of. If you're angry that somebody is unhappy, then you're angry about something that you don't have control over. And that is, in my opinion, one of the biggest issues that our generation has, is being angry and upset about things that we do not control.
Like, can you give me an example other than somebody being unhappy and we're not happy about them being unhappy?
A very popular thing right now is to want somebody to change their beliefs and opinions because we believe them. I do not have control of what you think or feel. I do not have control whatsoever of what your opinions are.
You're damn right.
We can scream at each other all we want. We can go into the crazy social media world that is, you know, all the social medias. I don't even need to list them. You know what they are. And it is a whirlpool of chaos. A whirlpool of contradicting opinions, thoughts, feelings, accusations.
Accusations.
Yeah. Occupations, accusations. It's all the same thing.
It's all the same thing.
But it all comes down to, what do you have control of? And you have control of those things. Something that my dad would told me is, what marbles do you have? Your head is a jar that you can fill with marbles. And you get to choose what marbles stay in your head. And the more attention and the more energy you give to a marble, the bigger it's going to get, and the more space it's going to fill, the heavier it's going to get. And you can choose beautiful, ornate marbles that are absolutely gorgeous and captivating, and you love, and you want to work on this for the rest of your life. That would be like your career, your passion, your family. That's a great marble to really delve into. In my opinion, a marble that isn't good to delve into is the opinions and facts of others, because you're going to keep throwing all of this energy and all of your energy, all of this time, all of this thought, all of this. You're creating so many emotions by putting your effort into that. And what do you have control over? You have control over how much you're going to freak out on somebody that they think kittens should have unlimited catnip.
Advocating for that one, because if we can get anything for Henny to chill out, then. No, man, but so that's what you were taught when you were younger. Do you still believe those things now? How well does that hold up?
I think it holds up really well, and it has helped me maintain my sanity at a lot of times. If you're in a really anxious position, if you're having an anxiety attack, you're really stressed, you don't know what to do, a great way to deal with that is to sit down and write, what do I have control over right now? What do I not have control over right now? What's inside of my circle? What's inside of my hula hoop? Or what's outside of it? And if I go, okay, I cannot control my assignments, I cannot control my deadlines, I cannot control all of these things, then you kind of free yourself of holding yourself responsible for those things. And then you can recognize that you do control how you respond to them.
Mm-hmm.
You get to choose what you're going to deal with first, or you get to choose what you're not going to do first, and when you're just going to take a nap and throw in the flag, or stay up until 4 in the morning and give it your all. And that's your control. You have control over that.
So you're of the mind that you are in complete control of yourself, regardless of what control you have over others, or over who others.
I do not think you have complete control of yourself. I think the only thing you do have control of exists inside of yourself, but that does not mean that you have control of yourself.
Okay.
For instance, like, I cannot choose when I need to go to the bathroom. That is something that naturally happens. I can influence it. My choices definitely influence that, but I can't just be like, right now is the time that I'm going to choose to go, and then it happens. No, it's not how it works. Same thing with a lot of your thoughts and your feelings. A lot of the time when I notice that a feeling is coming upon me, I try to recognize that I am not in control of that feeling. A feeling is something that comes upon you. It takes what it needs to be satisfied, and then it releases.
So, are we humans simply facilitators of minimal control? Is that what you're trying to say? I hate to ask questions that are like leading you to judgments, but like, are we simply mere facilitators in a boundless and controlless world? I promise we didn't smoke pot before this.
Yeah,
I know that's a hard question I just threw at you, but
I really think we are. Simply because you have a finite amount of resources. You have a finite amount of energy, finite amount of time, finite amount of things that you can do. I've even heard recently that you have a finite number of decisions that you can make in a day. So some of the most intelligent people choose to wear the same thing every day so they can make more decisions that are bigger than what t-shirt Jenny is going to like in my science class.
that seems highly unsanitary.
But you just buy a bunch of the same.
Yeah.
Like, I'm only going to wear a white t-shirt, and I'm just going to have 94 white t-shirts and do laundry every 4 months.
That's a little bit better than I've worn this 3 weeks in a row. What's the problem? Landon, there's pizza sauce all over. There's cheese, and there's a few things I can't quite identify.
Trust me, you don't want to smell my socks. But I do think that, and another interesting point that I got from my recent study of Buddhism is that you don't control your thoughts either.
Interesting. Why do you think that?
Because your brain is simply responding to senses.
Okay, so we're all reactionary creatures then.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the only thing that makes us different, or that makes us think that we're different, is that we have the ability to recognize that we're responding.
Okay.
And then in our recognition that we're responding, we get the illusion of control.
Okay, so we are reaction-based creatures facilitating a finite amount of control.
Yeah.
You know what? That is a pretty complete opinion for someone our age. Because most people, you ask anybody else in this house what it means to be in control, and they'll give you 1,000 things that they can control.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what does being in control mean to you?
Back to the fact that we don't truly have much control is simply being aware.
simply being aware that we are not in control, because what my parents taught me, it's that you control you. That's something that my mom always told me whenever I would want to point out one of my sister's mischievous deeds that she got away with that I wasn't be able to get away with. She would always tell me, you control you, I'll take care of everything else. That's what she told me. So I've always believed that I can control myself. I've always believed that I have the ability to control myself. Do you believe that you have the ability to at least control how you react to different things?
Sometimes I think, yeah. Other times I think that every single person is almost completely powerless, which is, it can be a very sad thing. It can also be a very freeing thing to think that, okay, where I was born, the situation that I was raised in, all of the factors that you can't nail down specifically, those all have contributed and caused things in me as a person that then creates, well, through cause and effect, creates new causes that lead down to a domino effect of my life.
Okay.
So in high school, I watched a documentary in English class. Shout out to John McCullough. He is a great guy. The way that he described himself was I may butcher this Harry Potter reference, Secrets of the Dark Arts. No.
Professor of the Dark Arts?
Yeah, it's
not wizard. It's not wizard. It's not wizard. It's not witch.
It's like protection against the dark arts.
I know. I'm sure the Harry Potter fans will be at our throats, but I understand what you're trying to say. Yeah.
And that's the way they describe himself, but for the modern world. So it was an English class based off of politics. So we would analyze the news, like the weekly news, through different books. So we read like 1984, the dystopian novel. We read a variety of other different books that contributed to what was going on politically, and that's how we adapted the way to try to understand how to navigate through it. So how is this fake? During the time as my junior year of high school, fake news was a huge thing.
Right.
And I remember like 3 days that we talked about fake news. What does that even mean? How do you deal with that?
What does it mean to understand the concept of fake news?
Yeah.
Right.
So that was my class. That was my English class. It was an awesome class. Very little homework, which is very nice.
Very nice.
And with that teacher, I ended up talking to him at the end of class, things like that, because I was kind of a teacher's pet, I'm not going to lie. And one of the days, he showed me a documentary, and I watched it. It was a short clip. There was this guy that was really sad, and it was just like really weird cartoon thing where they perfectly matched up this cartoon over a live video, so it looked realistic, but it didn't, and it was just odd. Back to the point, though, they were talking about on the quantum level of quantum physics, everything is simply a probability, which makes us simply a chain reaction of atoms and quantum physics that makes us think that we have control over our actions, when in all actuality, we don't, which is the same thing that Buddhism says.
Well, Landon, not purely to make good discourse or to make this an interesting podcast, but I think I disagree with you on this one. I think that us humans are in control with how we react. I think we are in control of our emotions. I think we can learn how to better manage how we feel about things and how we react to things. And the person that most exemplified it is the very recent and very heartbreaking loss of Chadwick Boseman. The man was diagnosed with, I believe, stage 3 colon cancer back in 2016, right when his Marvel movie career took off with Captain America Civil War. And he made Avengers Infinity War, he made Avengers Endgame, and of course, Black Panther, which was the most impactful Marvel movie to this date, at least from a cultural standpoint. He was Thurgood Marshall, he was Jackie Robinson, he was T'Challa, he was the guy, and he did all of these amazing feats. He was in 21 Bridges and the Five Bloods movie, all with stage 3 colon cancer, and he chose to do that. He chose to work out relentlessly. He pushed his body to the absolute max.
The man was ripped.
The man was ripped, and he fought the whole way with stage 3 colon cancer. Like, that would shut down all of my activities. I would choose to just quit right there. Right? I have to deal with this stage 3 colon cancer. And Chadwick Boseman made it his mission. He took control over his life. He took control over the disease. He managed it, and he brought so much energy, so much life. He brought new fans to the Marvel Universe, and he did that knowing with what he had. He knew the situation he was in. He knew he had very little control over what the disease was doing to him, but he said, "Fuck you, disease. I decide. I decide what I do.
I'm going to deal with you on my own terms."
Right, exactly. And he is the true example of what it means to be a father, to make that sacrifice, to know what he has, and to say, I have to push myself. I don't know how long I'm going to have this, so I need to push myself to provide for my family.
Mm-hmm.
And he probably had that thought of, I'm also doing this for my people, but I'm doing this for my family. And he did just so much wonderful work outside of Black Panther 2 with visiting children's hospitals, with going and touching kids that had the same thing that he had. And the fact that he did that not only with a graceful heart, but with an open mind and a beautiful soul, Chadwick Boseman truly exemplifies what it means of taking control of your life. And I really wish that he was still alive, and I really wish that the news hadn't broken 2020 of all years. But Chadwick Boseman, the loss of Chadwick Boseman will be felt for a long, long time. And oh my gosh, Landon, I'm starting to get emotional, so you better start talking.
I think something that's really impactful is the fact that we didn't know.
Oh yeah,
he didn't make this an ego thing. He, from our perspective, just on the ends of social media and whatever media is nowadays, he was doing it for the best intentions.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't want to be the guy who was simply talking about his disease. He overcame it by simply not giving it the attention that some people think that it needs.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, I'm not going to feed this. I'm not going to feed this difficulty. I'm not going to feed this struggle, because that'll simply just make it harder. If I try to, I'm assuming that if you would sit and just try to act for movies or work with your director, raise a son, have a happy family, and the only thing that you hear from media is, oh, we're so sorry that you have cancer, that I respect him so much for the fact that he overcame that in silence,
mm-hmm.
at least in public silence.
Mm-hmm. And we don't want to imply that Chadwick Boseman was a control freak by any stretch of the means.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that he took control of his life. He was handed a very bad set of cards at, quite frankly, the most inconvenient time, at least at his stage in the stage of his career that it was at. And he overcame it and brought the world, not just America, not just Marvel superhero fans. He brought the world a whole new perspective, and he brought the Black community a hero that people can look up to. And that's our 2 cents on Chadwick Boseman.
I do want to add one thing.
Go ahead.
Is the fact that he was not simply a hero for one community. He was a hero for everybody. I mean, if you think about the impact of the Marvel Universe, from my perspective, it is the next Star Wars. That's how big of an impact. I mean, you talk about if I remember when Endgame was talked about and was in the beginning stages of being released, people were going nuts everywhere. It was pop culture phenomenon. It was huge. And the fact that he was a part of that in such difficult struggles was amazing. And I think there is still things to be worked on, and there's a difference between diversity and variety, and there are probably ways in which, through our limited perspective, we do not see how there are faults in the movies and things like that, but at the same time, so much respect.
And
From our perspective on what we have, it was a fantastic work, and I have so much respect and love for the man.
well, and Boseman opened the door. Boseman opened the door for the talks about diversity and variety. He opened the door. I mean, he for all intents and purposes, he's the Black Superman.
Yeah,
He's the man.
he is.
And we really mourn the loss, and obviously our thoughts and our prayers are with his family, especially with his wife and children. And I can't imagine what the hurt that must have been carried around the Boseman household, knowing what was going on, but knowing that you couldn't talk about it, knowing you couldn't openly speak about it. And sort of, I'm sorry. So, sort of shifting gears back into the conversation we were having about control. Landon, why do you believe people want control? Why do we chase the concept of control like a bunny rabbit in the field? Like, why are we so enamored with the idea of being in control that we're willing to do some pretty horrible things to ascertain that tiny feeling?
I think in the pursuit of power, there is the goal of running away from fear. So as you're running towards power and running towards control, for a lot of cases, it's running away from weakness, running away from the fear of weakness. I would probably think that Hitler, he was a very shallow and insecure individual, and that would probably make to be someone who would use everything within his control to gain as much power as possible.
I'm sorry. Whenever somebody drops an H-bomb in a conversation, I'm just like, what follows next is very crucial.
Yeah.
To how I look at you as a person.
There were a lot of H-bombs in World War II.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Very nice. Not nice, but very nice. It was a good joke.
Yeah. One that I'm ashamed of. But power is simply something that is pursued after to escape weakness, to escape fear. In my opinion.
I think people want control because they want security. They want to feel like they have it. They don't necessarily want control because very few people are cut out to be CEOs. Very few people are cut out to be bosses. That's just kind of the truth. I know that it would be a very bad idea if I became the Delta Upsilon president. That'd be a very bad idea. I'm not cut out to be a CEO.
Cats in every room!
Well, I know that would be a bad idea because I don't think that I'd be a good boss, if you know what I mean. I think there are a few people that were cut out for that, but people want that feeling of control, like I have this ability to take control if I want to. I'm controlling the amount of control you have. I think that's the overarching concept of control, at least for why people want it.
And to go off of that in a leadership sense, some of the best leaders and some of the best facilitators and managers are the ones that are super authentic and recognize that they aren't in the pursuit of power.
Mm-hmm.
So the people that are in the most control are the ones that recognize that they don't have it. It's a beautiful paradox. I will throw in my aunt as an example. She has a master's degree job, and she never went to college. She works at a energy plant where she is the manager of a huge technology department, the department that works on being safe, being secure, the IT department. And the way that she approaches her entire male team as a woman is by saying, hey, you guys are some smart guys. You guys are brilliant, and I am not to the same level of expertise that you are in a bunch of different areas. She says, what I am good at is recognizing that you guys have these and going to try to help you in her best ability to get them together and maximize that.
Mm-hmm.
And so she recognizes that she isn't the most powerful, she isn't the most controlling, but she's in control of her own status. And I think that is the best way to be a leader.
Yeah, and leading isn't always about control.
And to change gears a little bit, I am currently single and actively pursuing being single, and you're in a committed relationship. How long have you been in a relationship?
I've been in a relationship for almost 2 years now. It will be 2 years in November.
Congrats, man.
Thank you.
That's
Thank you
awesome.
very much. Thank you.
Especially through a pandemic.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was easy. We decided to live together. So that was really... It was a little rough at first because you got to learn how to live with somebody, but...
Yeah. And so, like, in a relationship, what have you learned about where control sits?
That is a very good question. Control does not sit with one party. It does not revolve around one person's ideas. It does not necessarily mean that one person is going to be calling the shots. We have a very progressive relationship, my wonderful fiance Olivia and I, and she and I both agree that communication establishes trust and also establishes control. It's a lot easier to tackle a problem if there are two people instead of one. However, if she gets hyper upset, I will take whatever position she's taking.
That probably saves some arguments.
And that's my way of controlling when and where we argue.
So it kind of goes back to the saying of you choose your battles.
Well, I don't have control over when fights are going to happen. And neither does she, so to speak. Through no fault of our own, through no fault of anyone's own, relationships create tension. And when there's tension, people start to get afraid. People get afraid, they want control, or they want to feel like they have control, so they start to hunker down and throw up the walls and stuff like that. And when we both realize that control is utterly meaningless when dealing with another person, that's when our relationship really changed. Because when we were just starting out, I'll admit I was trying to control the conversation and stay with the topics that I knew that I could make myself look smart about. And then I realized as I got, I don't want to say more mature because it happened within like 3 months, but as we grew together, sort of learned that if you are looking for control, you shouldn't be in a relationship. And if you're looking for control, you shouldn't be dragging somebody else into your own insecurities. So that's what I think.
With that, there comes a class that I took last year was a very progressive way of a class, in the sense that I wrote my own syllabus for this class. And something that the professor talked about was that when you have a set amount of boundaries, that means that you also, in some sense, set your conclusions at the same time.
Interesting.
So if you set things at the very beginning, that means in some way you're setting something at the end. You're setting, like with the number of words that we use and the number of characters, there are only a certain number of words that I can start "buh" with. You're a "buh." I can say both. But because there are only so many amounts of responses, and I have already limited it to starting with a B, then the end is partially fixed. And I think that same ideology can work in a relationship.
So once you establish the boundaries, we establish the end game. Is that
To a
what,
certain, yeah. So if you try to like have control in some way, if you try to like grab this one part and like I'm not letting go of this part, this is the one thing that I refuse to let go of, then you're fixing something at the end.
interesting.
But most of the time, the more you try to grab onto that one thing, excuse me, the more you try to grab onto that one thing, the crazier that fixed thing is going to get, and the more out of control you're going to get because you can't predict what that fixed thing is. There's a special word for it that I can't think of.
That is an interesting concept
Yeah.
because it's like you're predetermining how well or how bad in your case, the class is going to go.
Mm.
That's a very interesting concept. Do you believe that setting boundaries is a way of establishing control?
I think setting boundaries is a good way to establish where control ends.
Interesting.
So you don't always establish a fence to keep something out. You can also establish a fence to keep something in.
Mm-hmm.
So back to what do you control about yourself? In your hula hoop, the only thing that you control is inside of that boundary, is inside of that hula hoop. That is your fence of saying, hey, I know that I can't step outside of this, so I'm going to work with what I have. In a relationship, you don't have any control of the other person.
Mm-hmm.
Which is that's a crazy thing that you're going like, okay, I'm committing to this one thing, knowing that I have absolutely no control of what that other person is going to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's extremely frightening. And for me, on the outside looking in, it's a beautiful thing to be able to trust somebody like that. Which, now that we're talking about it, it makes sense that people say that trust is the biggest issue in a relationship, or one of the biggest assets in a relationship.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Liv and I came to. Even though she is my fiance, she's her own person. Even when we get married and when we have children, those are our children. They're their own people. She's my wife. She's her own person. Just like I'm her husband, I'm their father, I'm also me, and I control me. I can't really control what my wife does or what my children do when I'm not looking. But I mean, I like to think that we have at least a little bit of control in our lives, at least how we respond to things. It sounds like we were on the same wavelength with that, with also the understanding that we are uncontrollable creatures who have uncontrollable thoughts.
Mm-hmm. To kind of spin off of the control in a relationship, what connection does power and control have?
Well, they're directly correlated. I mean, obviously you can't have power if you don't have control. You can use power to control people. So they both work off of each other very, very well. You need power to control people, and you can control people with power. That's the philosophical answer. From a relationship standpoint, if you're thinking about power and control, as I mentioned before, you're not in a relationship for the right reasons.
I don't think they are directly correlated. I believe we think they are.
Okay.
So, like recently with the protests and riots that have been happening recently, where does control and power come into play there?
The power is in the people. The control is in the higher-ups who want to control the protesters. The power and the people are saying, we demand change, we demand reform. And the control is, we'll decide.
Yeah.
We'll decide what's best for the country. That's why law enforcement hasn't been touched on, not even reestablished, broken down to the skeleton and built back up. That's why that hasn't happened yet. It's because the higher ups, the people with the money, still have control.
So is it if you have a lot of power, then you have a lot of control?
Theoretically,
Or is it if you have a lot of control, then you can't have a lot of power?
well, kind of going back to the Marvel Universe, Bruce Banner has a lot of power in in both his mind and when, someone pokes him with a pin and it rubs him the wrong way. Right? Like
Yeah.
he is both powerful as the Hulk and as Bruce Banner. So it's not necessarily that you need a whole lot of power to have control. It certainly doesn't hinder you to control people if you have more power. But I do believe once you have more control over people, you have more power.
So can you have power without having control?
I want to say yes. I want to believe there is an instance. I can't think of one right now, which probably means there's not. Which probably means if I have to think about it and I have to dance my way through the English vocabulary and, tie one piece to another, probably means that just because you have, say that again, just because
you have power, does that mean that you have control? Or can you have power without control?
I don't think you can have power without control.
I disagree.
Okay, go ahead.
I think of a villain in a Marvel movie. They can have a lot of power, but they do not have control of the end result.
Oh, okay, that makes a lot more sense.
So you can think of Donald Trump. He has a lot of power, but he has absolutely no control of how people see him. He has a lot of power as the President of the United States. President of the United States is one of the most powerful positions that you can have in the world.
The most powerful. The U.S. has all the codes.
Yeah, true. And with all of that power, he still doesn't have control of his country.
No, he does not.
So you can have power without having control. And also, when you said that the power is in the people, from my perspective, I think that they have control over their roles.
Their domain.
They have control, and by they I mean we the people have control over what we do in assembly and in our society. But that does not mean that we have power. The reason why protests are happening is because there is a lack of power, and they're doing what they have within their control, within some of their power. Well, in some instance, all of their power, to get more, or to get more say of what they want their life to be, or how they're going to be treated by people who have power and control. I don't know. It's an odd relationship.
And yet, one might argue that the people have more power than they originally believed because of the way people have protested and because of the vast majority of the population agrees with the Black Lives Matter movement. People are starting to realize, hey, the government doesn't have as much control or as much power as we've been led to believe. And that's why people are starting to demand the arrests of the police officers who killed peaceful citizens like Breonna Taylor.
Yeah.
People are still calling for Breonna Taylor's murderers to be arrested and tried. Yeah. And it's happened through individual cases, obviously with George Floyd, with Derek Chauvin, he's in jail, right? Yeah. And so were the other 3 police officer trainees that were on site. And it's because people protested and gained power in numbers. They started to gain more control, and that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to have a shifting control and power balance. It's really not, because the government is there to serve the people, and the people are there to serve the government. It's a two-way street.
It's a relationship.
It's a relationship, like we keep talking about here. And it's a very toxic relationship, obviously, because we are talking about control and we are talking about power. But, and on the grand scheme of the nation. We need to have these conversations about power and control, and we need to constantly question, is this the right thing for the people, or are these the right people we want to represent us in government? And we have to constantly ask those questions and constantly shift the power and the control between the two parties, between the government and the people.
I think that the idea of control and power are very disillusioned.
Mm-hmm.
So earlier I proposed the theory that we do not have any control,
Mhm.
and you politely disagreed. I think that we can agree that power or lack of power is simply an illusion, based off what perspective that we have.
Without a doubt, I believe we control ourselves. I don't believe we have any power to control what happens to us.
That's a great way to put it.
English writing major.
But I do think that the amount of power that you think you have, or the lack of amount of power that you think you have, is probably off. Like, to a certain extent, it is an illusion. You simply have the power and have the control that you think you do.
Mm-hmm.
And which means that you could be overarching. You could be overextending yourself and thinking that you have way more control of yourself than you think you do, and that's why you keep, like, basically tripping over yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It could also be that you think you're a helpless victim. And that's also a great example of that is how, with some of the conversations I've had and some of my own personal experiences, the difference between a victim and a survivor is the amount of power that somebody thinks they have, the amount of power that somebody attributes to themselves. If I label myself as a victim, that means that I most likely am labeling myself as somebody who is lacking power.
Something happened to you,
Yes.
and as a result, you are the way that you are now.
Yes.
Okay.
But in a sense, I can also say something happened to me, but I'm not going to be a victim of it because I'm going to move past it and grow from it.
Okay.
And in that sense, you're a survivor. So if you say, this happened to me and it will constantly be a burden in my life and I will never be at the same point that I ever used to be, well, that could be true, but that doesn't mean that it is a lesser stance. It is simply different.
Mm-hmm.
Something that's really beautiful about Taoism, and which that's the yin and yang, is that there's duality in everything. There's duality in everything, which means that there's not good and evil. That means there's just two opposite energies in everything, which means you can see something from two opposing connotations, basically.
Okay.
And so, I don't know, I feel like the way that we view things contributes a lot.
Okay.
Contributes a lot.
So let me ask you one more question before we have to wrap this up. How does control, or at least the idea of control, play into your daily life?
In my daily life, I have this fire in me that is always saying that I need to be doing the most efficient and the best thing possible in every moment. It is literally like a fire that I feel all of the time, and it's just like a little teeny tiny little voice in the back of my head that says, what are you doing? Are you doing it right? Are you sure you're doing it right? Could you be doing something better? What else could you be doing with your time right now? Is that really efficient? Did you really need to sleep in that long? And in some instances, it is like, oh, you're doing a really great job. Keep going. That is a great thing. Keep on going, keep on going. At the same time, it can be one of the most debilitating aspects of myself. It is a thing that has made me extremely successful. It is also a thing that makes me have anxiety attacks on, used to be like a weekly basis. And so, with control in that, I can't control that fire. I cannot control my ambitions, and in some cases, I can't control my thoughts. I can't control the random "you are a shitty person" thought. Like, you can't. Like, it's, for some reason, it is a natural thing that I can't explain, and I would like somebody to explain to me. But in control of my daily life, as you said earlier, I recognize that I control the way that I deal with it. I control the way that I react. I control how I'm going to respond to an emotion. I've said this before, but I like to think of emotions as signals that you get from your body. It is simply a sign that something is going on, and you get to choose what you're going to do with it.
That's very interesting. And that's a very well thought out and probably well informed opinion. Me, on the other hand, I live my life on one line that I heard in one of Tom Cruise's best movies, Days of Thunder. Days of Thunder, it's a movie about NASCAR back when it was truly stock cars, back when they could bang off of each other and it wouldn't make a difference, right? Robert Duvall was in that movie, and he's coaching Tom Cruise on how to be a better NASCAR driver, and he tells him, when the car is loose, it is fast, it is dangerous, and it is on the edge of out of control. And that's how I want to live my life. Fast, dangerous, and on the edge of out of control.
That explains a lot. I feel like the way that we both just described how we actively use control in our lives explains so much about us.
Well, Landon, now that we're wrapping up episode 2, you know what the one concept that dictates both how we view power and control that we briefly touched on, haven't quite delved into yet?
What?
Fear. Oh, yeah, baby.
I'm excited.
Episode 3 is going to be a lot of fun. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in to What Our Parents Said. I hope that you're enjoying your experience thus far. From all of us here at Delta Upsilon, or excuse me, the DePaul chapter of the Delta Upsilon fraternity, I'm Jack Woods. Landon Wood, as always. Have a good night, y'all.
See ya.